Hey, on my Travel Wins podcast, I'm lucky to have Chad and Michael. How are you today, Chad?
Great. How are you?
Doing excellent. Chad is the, I don't know, I didn't get your exact title. Boss, big man, founder, chief, president, CEO, Jefe.
My nickname is the Mastermind, but
we'll go with that.
But on paper, I'm the CEO
of Adventure Games, which is a very cool team building game company for other companies. Give us an outline of what Adventure Games does.
Sure. So we produce team building events for companies. So we're business to business, and we have a dozen different live action games that encourage coworkers to work together and play together and create and harness relationships. And it's all done through the power of play.
Yeah, you mean you literally bring in facilitators. You have different groups, and it's kind of cool to watch some of that. I watched what do you call the Explorer videos. I watched those little quick videos.
Yes, yeah, we have different. Each one of our games has a little explainer video.
Explainer videos. That's what I was. I'm sorry.
Yeah, to show you what they are. But yeah, they're live action. So our most popular game has always been our spy game, where we come in and interrupt their meeting and take control of it. We act like we're FBI agents, and we show a video of their boss being kidnapped, and then they download an app to their phone that's GPS based, and it shows them where there's all these different points of interest they need to explore. And when they would get there, because it's GPS based, it would unlock and to show you a picture of an informant. Could be sitting in a coffee shop or sitting at the bus stop,
gotcha.
or and you have to go in and drop a code word and interrogate them and try to figure out where your boss is. That one's super fun. And halfway through, you figure out, that one of your own teammates is a mole sabotaging you. So you got to figure out who it is. So there's a lot of layers to it. It's very spy versus spy. So, and that's just one example of the many programs that we do. But my big thing has always been theater, and I always loved the stage and live theater, and this game really is like a live theatrical production that takes place on foot, and it moves around your city. And of course, with everything that's been going on, we've had to segue and take all of these experiences and make them virtual.
Well, that was one of the big reasons I was so excited to speak with you is how do we pivot? Location-wise, how many different locations were you able to set up the games in before COVID?
Yeah. Prior to this, we were in all 50 states. We were producing events, and it was it was a really exciting time because every day I was waking up in a different state, in a different city. And it was a lot of fun, but it was also very exhausting.
Sure.
And I got to the point and to the level where I started training people in all these major cities where we would frequent, like Houston, Dallas, Miami, Vegas, etc. And I would train them to do what I do. And so I didn't have to travel as much, but then we were always, stacked, where we would have multiple of these on the same days in different cities and different states. So it started becoming a bit of more of a production, just getting there and getting set up than what I initially had, kind of set out for when I started this company. But it was exciting because we were doing, so many programs and working with so many companies, and, it was nice to put smiles on a lot of people's faces. But then when the COVID thing happened, it was like one by one, our calendar started getting canceled. So like early March, we're starting to see the writing on the wall. We're like, okay. And, one company canceled because they're like, oh, we have people from China and they can't come over, so we're going to cancel. And then the next week it was like 2 or 3 more canceled. And then pretty soon everybody canceled. And I thought, okay, well, this will probably be a month.
Couple weeks,
we'll be back to normal. People will get over this pretty quickly. No. So a month into this, I was really enjoying my vacation because I had been going so hard for so long. And I finally had a moment to just breathe and start going back to the gym and, doing the things I've been neglecting. And one day I woke up and I'm like, this business, it's not coming back. And I can't just, let everything that I've worked so hard for the last 15 years just dry up. So I know we were still kind of reaching out to our clients, kind of getting a feel, and there was kind of this really gloomy atmosphere of when we would talk to our clients. They're almost like, I think everybody was just in a little bit of a shock and fear, and they didn't want to hear from us, of course. They're like, oh, we'll get back to you when we know what's going on, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And we decided we had a program that we'd already developed. It's called the Situation Room. And this is actually a product that I have patent pending on. Essentially what it is, it's a interactive film, and you interact with it with your cell phone. It's kind of similar to what Netflix is doing with some of their series where you can make choices for the actors. Yep. So it has some of that element, but it's a game because you're competing against other people to try to solve puzzles you're essentially on this kind of treasure hunt. And you're following these two pair of detectives, and it appears like it's live. So they have a cameraman following them around, kind of like a news camera, and they're talking to you, asking you questions. What should we do? Here's a puzzle. Can you solve it? And so you're working in teams, and you want to be the first team to solve it, so that you get the highest point. So we had this game that was already designed to be played remotely in various different offices at the same time. That now everybody's office is like remote. At their home, but they're not even in offices. So what do we do? How do we get all these 30, 40 people playing at the same time in different locations? So we're like, let's try this through Zoom. So we did a practice game with some of our friends for game night, and the video playback was near perfect. I couldn't believe it. I thought, the playback's not going to be good. It's kind of whatever. Everyone's got to download the app. It's going to be a big process. But it worked perfectly. Like, great. Let's send out a newsletter to our 10,000, previous clients and find out if they have any interest in this. And so we sent out a newsletter, and it was overwhelming. Within an hour, we had 40 companies requesting a demo, and all of a sudden I was back to work. And these last 2 months, I've never worked harder in my life because we had to take as many games as that we had and try to figure out how to make them virtual because we needed more products. Like, okay, not everybody thought the Situation Room was the right game for them. It was too hard. It was too challenging. They just want to laugh, have fun. So we started coming out with more games that are, less cognitive and just, have a cocktail in your hand and have fun. So every month since then, we've been coming out with a new game. So we have 4 solid ones now, and we're getting ready to come out with a 5th one of just kind of more of a grab bag of just fun games like bingo and Jeopardy, the things that people are familiar with. But most of our clients are wanting this more higher level game. So like the spy games that I had just described to you where you go out and find these informants, we figured out a great way to make that happen remotely, where we have our actors online and they go into breakout rooms and these actors visit you while you're in the breakout room and they share their screen with you. And they're like, I got this puzzle. I can't figure it out. So in order to get intel from these actors, these informants, you have to solve their puzzle. So it's working really, really well. And there's still the mole element. They have to drop a random weird code word like pineapple to every single informant. So after a while, your teammates are going to be like, why does John keep talking about pineapple? And then they start realizing, wait, there's a mole. Plus, we still use our app, and they have to upload some random photos through the timeline, and so they can start to see, wait, this person is doing weird stuff. That's how they get found out. But we've been having a lot of success with this, more than I was really expecting. And especially this soon out of the gate, I was thinking that people were going to wait a little longer. But I think what's happening now is companies are telling us, we are not going back to the office this entire year. Yeah, we will revisit it in 2021, see where things are at. So now that everyone has accepted the fact that we're not going back to traveling and doing our, person-to-person events, We're not even going to our offices in our own towns. We need to connect. There's this, like, we are, as humans, we desire and need human connection. It's mandatory for our mental health. And companies are trying to figure out, how do we connect with one another? And not only that, how do we keep it fun? Because sitting in front of your computer all day, there's a term that's actually going around called Zoom fatigue, where people are in front of these video conferencing, and it's mind numbing. So companies are reaching out to us to come in and to kind of break that up, and also just allow people to just have some fun with each other and connect and work together that's not work related, so that we can still keep those relationships alive and keep those connections, still there. So I feel really like happy and blessed that I'm in a position where I can, not only keep my company going, but be in a position to help people in this time, of need, when we really need connection. And I'm so grateful that there's all of these video conferencing softwares out there that we were able to use, because without that, what would we do? So I'm so glad things like Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and all of those are out there for our benefit right now. It's really helping. And I'm kind of wondering, now that we're getting used to this, when we are able to go back to normal, do we want to? Do we want to go back to the daily grind of, having to leave and go to an office every day when you can be just as effective working at home? So that's to be seen, but for right now, we're really enjoying the online thing, and companies are, the feedback we're getting is far superior than the feedback we were doing in live events, because I think, not that our in live events are not as good, it's just the fact that they're not expecting the kind of connection that happens remotely when we do our games. They have, it's kind of uncharted waters, which is why we're doing demos every day. People sit on our demos and they go, "Oh, okay, I get it." Yeah. And then when they see how the connections are happening and these relationships are being built and managed, they're just beyond ecstatic. They weren't expecting that, and I wasn't expecting it either. I'm just as shocked that this is working. But
corporate morale is still needed. I mean, whether they're everyone's saying, my largest customer, most of the people are remote. The main people come in and they rotate. So some buyers come in on Mondays and Wednesdays to work in the office and get things done, and then the others come in on Tuesday and Thursday, and no one comes in on Friday. And so there's that camaraderie that they had is gone. So this would be a good way for them to build it back up.
Yeah, I see this being more important now than ever to do these types of events, because we need to keep that morale. And when you're working by yourself, sitting in front of your computer all day, and a lot of parents are having to now homeschool their kids. And on top of all of this, it's just, it's really amazing to me how adaptable humans can be. And I think that's the one lesson that we're all going to learn from 2020 is how to become adaptable and how to work with the tools that are right in front of you. Because at any time, things can just be taken from you, and the way of life that we're used to can just be erased. I would have never thought that we would ever be in this position ever. Who would have thought this, right?
Yeah.
But, we've had to be adaptable. And I think, now more than ever, we need this type of connection. Even in my personal life, I find myself FaceTiming my cousins. I used to never do that. My family, we try to call each other every day on a conference call. Where my friends from overseas, which I was planning on seeing this summer, but now we can't. We're connecting through video conference, and we're having drinks together. It's kind of interesting how we've adapted to this weird, strange normal, and oddly, it's working.
Well, I think that you're right. I think that's just human nature. We're going to survive because that's what we have to do. Mm-hmm. And adaptability is just I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's so like some of the meetings I've had to do so far, even under the new rules and guidelines that we have here in our strict state of California, is my meetings are being outside. Well, thankfully, we live in a nice weathered state, so being outside in San Luis Obispo or in Ventura for a meeting sitting on a park bench is not too bad. You know?
Correct. Yeah.
I don't know how that would be in North Dakota in January, but doing, you know, we're having to do meetings outside. My largest customer, I did our entire seasonal meeting via Zoom, where my boss was back east. I'm here, and my customers were in their homes, and we just, you know, it worked out. So yeah, I don't know. We're adaptable. That's what we have to do.
Yeah, we are. But the one thing that is always going to be something that we need is that we got to have human connection. And, you know, without that, it's just, you know, it can cause a lot of things, you know, it can cause depression. I mean, there's been so many studies of this.
Oh, dude, I've got friends that are, one friend just passed away of alcoholism. He was laid off or furloughed. So his issues of drinking became even worse as he literally just sat at home and had nothing to do all day because his job was everything he had. And he just sat in his house and drank until his organs shut down.
Oh, and those are the tragic stories that we're not going to hear about.
No.
You know, there's so many individual stories that we're just not seeing. You know, think about, oh man, the things that are going on behind closed doors right now because, you know, we're kind of forced to be. So that's kind of the ugly side to this that I think in time we're going to start to see more of.
Totally
but,
agree.
You know, but of course, for us and what we're trying to do, we're trying to just focus on the positive and you know, offer something that brings joy to people, especially, you know, imagine your friend if he had, you know, some other sort of outlet or connection to other people. Maybe he wouldn't have, you know, gone down that path. We don't know.
Yeah, we'll never know. You know, and it's like we talked about before we start recording is you know, my podcast. It's like my day job is down about 30 to 35%. Just, you know, when stores aren't open to sell, I don't sell anything. But because I have something else, you know, I have my wife, my dog, my kids, and my podcast, I have other things to keep me going. Whereas I think if you know, if you don't have those connections with other people, it can get bad.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I get asked a lot, you know, especially when people ask me what I do, and I do corporate team building. And of course, the biggest question is like, what's that? So I always have to describe what I do because it is very niche. But the next question people always ask me is, how did you get started doing this? And, you know, my answer is, you know, it all started with an idea, of course. And then you start to visualize how this can work. And then you just kind of do it. You just show up. It's pretty much the first step. You just need to show up. And all the tools that you need will just appear when you need them. And I think looking back, if I'd known how much work it was going to be to start this company and all the trials and ups and downs, I would have never done it. But you can't look that far. Nope. You have to look far enough to see the end result, but you can't look at the journey, because if you look at the journey, it's going to scare you. But my biggest advice to people is that everything that you need is right at your fingertips.
Yeah.
You just literally have to be open to receive it, and the right person will show up. The right connection will happen. The right idea will happen. You may be down to your last dollar in your bank account, and then your mom's like, hey, we're sending you $100, or it could be you find something on the ground, or a client comes out of nowhere. I mean, this has happened to me so many times in my life that I've gotten to the point where you just have to really step out of fear. And I think that's the biggest thing that's happening right now is everybody is so caught up in fear that if we can just step out of that and just know that the resources that we need to get through whatever situation we're in are right at our fingertips, and just trust that and trust the creation process, boom, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But sadly, so many people just get stuck in this kind of fear mode, and that's when you start to spiral out of control.
Well, I think too is for me, I'm in my almost mid 50s, and a lot of people are like, I knew nothing about podcasting, I knew nothing about editing, I knew nothing about website design, I knew nothing about publishing, marketing for a podcast. So people were like, well, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, there are so many avenues now to learn. Just turn on YouTube and you can figure out a whole bunch. So
exactly. When I started my business, all my promo videos, I actually edited them together myself because I had learned how to do that. I was a broadcast journalism student in major and in college. And so I learned how to use Adobe Premiere. And that one skill has been so beneficial. And when I had to pivot and do all of these online games, of course, we were having zero sales. So I can't just justify spending all this money, hiring someone to do, edit new videos that show how they work remotely. So I did it myself. And there were some times when I'm like, oh, shoot, I can't remember how to get this certain effect to happen. Boom, go on YouTube. Yep. And in 1.5 minutes, I was given the information that I needed to make this effect work. So, now more than ever is the time for entrepreneurs to just rise to the top, because information is at your fingertips, literally.
Yeah.
And you can create whatever you're passionate about. Somebody else is going to be passionate about it too, because you're passionate about it, and they're going to pay you for it. It's just how it works.
Well, what's interesting too is I can't remember exactly who said it, but a lot of old people like myself, often say, "Oh, I can't learn that. I can't figure out apps. I can't figure out my phone, or I can't figure it." It's like, well, yeah, you can. It's like, yeah, you can. You can figure out anything. It's like, depending on how bad you want it. Your entire business changed in February, and you didn't even know it was going to happen. But yet, your business is still around and still thriving.
Yeah.
I can imagine going back to January, February, and telling yourself, "Hey, get ready. The world's going to shift for us."
Well, it's interesting. I had this. I don't know. I almost had a premonition that something was coming, because I even said out loud to my team, we need to start producing remote programs. This was back end of last year. And I was just so stressed all the time with all these live action games that were going on all over the country, because it's just not getting a facilitator there. Each game requires 5 to 7 staff. So now we have to hire a local. Will they show up on time? Will they be presentable? If we haven't worked with them before, there was a lot of stress. And I thought, gosh, wouldn't life be so great if I could just do all this remote and just do kind of do-it-yourself team building games? We just sell you a kit. That's kind of where my mind was going at the end of last year. And that's why I started creating the Situation Room and investing in that technology.
Yeah.
Because I kind of wanted to go there. So it's almost weird. It's strange how something cosmic was kind of preparing me for this. So I didn't feel completely like the wind was taken out of my sails when this happened, because I felt like somehow some cosmic energy, I don't know how if that sounds strange or not, but something was preparing me for this, and I had the tools when I needed them. And that's kind of what I always go back to. You'll have the tools when you need them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's why my wife says I don't win the lottery. Because I don't need it.
Why most people that win the lottery, though, they lose it.
That's what she says, and she's like, "We don't need it. You have everything you need." I'm like, "God damn." Yeah. But an extra 100 million wouldn't suck.
Yeah, but you need it. Let me tell you a story. This is a true story. about, oh man, this was 15, 16 years ago. It was before I started Adventure Games. I was at that time, I was doing like this event, and I was living in southern Utah, and I had worked a deal with the city, and I was doing a weekly street fair. Every Thursday night, they would let me have access, give me permits to shut the street down, and I brought in vendors and bands, and it was super awesome.
Like in St. George area?
Yeah, it was in St. George.
Okay.
And there was a lot of controversy around me because I was an outsider that came into this town and was doing this, and a lot of weirdness, and a lot of the downtown store owners started realizing, wow, this could potentially be a cash cow. Yeah. And they're doing the math because they know how much I'm charging for all these booths, and they're like, this guy's making a fortune. So they wanted control of the event. So they started causing problems with the city council and going to the city council meetings and this painting of this horrible picture of me, who I am as a person. It was crazy. And the city didn't want to deal with the drama, so they just pulled my permit, and then they gave it to them. They literally took my business and stole it from me and gave it to the downtown people. I was devastated. I didn't get out of bed for 3 months. I just sat there and I just watched my bank account just dry up.
Yeah. And
it got to the point where I literally had $2 in my bank account. So I couldn't even buy food. I had to just eat whatever was in my cupboard. And I thought, you know what? One day I thought, I can't, what am I going to do? I'm at the bottom here. I can't get any lower than where I am. So I went for a walk in Snow Canyon. If anybody has ever been there, they'll know that canyon is magical. There's just something about it. There's this kind of natural wisdom that's in these rocks. And I would go on walks up there all the time to kind of clear my head. And this time I went there, it's almost kind of like a prayer to the universe. I am at the bottom, and I just let all this angst out of my body. And I got to the top of the trail, and I just said out loud what I wanted. I want a change. I want to go back to what I was doing before this. I want to, feel that excitement every morning, waking up, knowing that, what's the good news of today. And I felt so empowered when I got home from that walk that there was an email from an old client. I had done a grand opening for a big housing development in Salt Lake City called Daybreak. And I did this huge, 2-weekend event. We brought in celebrities, brought in bands. We did a whole Americana chili cookout with the Boy Scouts. And it was just this, petting zoo, the whole cool thing, right? And they had a new marketing director, and she emailed me. She says, hi, I've taken over for marketing. You're a legend in our company. We're opening phase 2 of this development, and we need you back this entire summer. What's your hourly rate? And I just threw some ridiculous rate out there, and they said, great. And not only did they do that, they gave me in advance. So I had money to drive myself up to Salt Lake City. Yeah, and eat. And I made enough money that summer that I was able to move to Las Vegas and start Adventure Games. I was able to put up a website, get some marketing materials, and then I knocked on the doors of all the meeting planners in Las Vegas, and within 3 months, I was in business. So, again, the tools that you need will show up when you need it. I had $2 in my bank account. Within 24 hours, I had a few $1,000s in my bank account that I was not expecting. And, even when I moved to Las Vegas, I'm like, man, I rented a house more than I could afford because I figured that would get me out of bed every morning. And right when I needed to pay my rent,
that's one way to do it.
I'm like, oh man, I got to pay my rent tomorrow. I got a phone call from an attorney. I had been in a car accident 5 years prior that I had forgotten about. It was a little fender bender, no big deal. They finally settled, and I had a couple $1,000s coming to me. He was like, I'll overnight you the check. And the next day I had $2,000. And that was my rent. So they'll pay my rent. I mean, I really just firmly believe that if you just kind of open to knowing that when you need something, it'll be there. It'll just happen for you. I don't know. That's the way I live my life. People think I'm crazy, and then when they realize
things happen,
yeah, when they start to go, when they let go of their judgment and they just kind of allow things to happen, they go, wow, Chad knows what he's talking about.
Well, you know, I love documentaries, right? And it's always interesting for me to watch them. And, you know, at the time, people are just going through this turmoil. But then when they can reflect back, they go, I saw Joe Walsh from the Eagles. And they said, wow, you've led such a blessed life and this and that. He goes, boy, it was I don't want to repeat it because I don't want to change my explicit rating. But, you know, he said it was an effing mess at the time. But now, you know, you look back and you go, oh, everything worked out the way it was supposed to. Because without the mess, you would have appreciated the good parts and all that. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like, you know, I remember 2008 was a complete nightmare for many, many millions of Americans when the recession hit. You know, and it seems like a lot of people have forgotten that we recovered out of that pretty well. So hopefully we'll recover out of this, you know, change pretty well. So,
you know, we will, because, you know, we're humans, we're adaptable. Yeah. And you look back the history of the world, even with what we're dealing with right now, it's not nearly as horrible as, you know, can you imagine what our grandparents lived through, like World War I and World War II? You know, imagine living in those times and the kind of fear that you have every day of like not knowing when the, you know, next shoe's going to drop. And I think what we're dealing with now, I think we've just become so spoiled and entitled that everything is just, you know, ours for the taking, that this has really humbled a lot of people. Yeah. And I know it's humbled me because I realize, wow, everything can be taken from you in the blink. What are you going to do? How are you going to adapt? Are you going to drink yourself to death? Are you going to, you know, go look for new tools?
Yeah. See,
you know,
that's exactly how I feel about it, because, you know, I don't. Everyone's going to handle the stress differently. You know, and I mean, I got friends that have lost literally everything. You know, don't have a job, don't work, don't when they're going to work. My daughter's boyfriend just graduated from the University of Maryland, and he's been looking for 4 or 5 months now. Can't find a job. You know, because everyone wants to, you know, it runs into everyone's experience. Well, he's been in college for the last 4 years. So here's a college degree kid that can't find a job. So he's doing Postmates, you know, driving around. So I don't know. We'll all figure it out. It's just going to take time. And then we'll look back on it and go, wasn't that bad.
Right. You know, we all go through that. I mean, I remember one time I wanted to start a business putting up Christmas lights. So, because I love doing, you know, if you come to my house at Christmas, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is even more crazier than we thought, you know. Half my garage is just storage of Christmas decorations. So it's like always been my thing. And so I thought, well, why don't I get paid to do this? So I was in college, you know, I wanted to earn some extra money. So I made flyers and I went around to all the affluent neighborhoods and I passed out flyers on every single home. I did not get one single phone call.
Sure.
Not one. And then a few years later, I met this guy. He lives in LA. I met him at some party in wherever I was. And he owns a company, and that's all they do is do people's Christmas decorations, put them up and take them down every year.
Gotcha.
And I thought, I tried to do this and I couldn't get like one call. And this guy, of course, was just throwing money around left and right. So obviously he was doing well.
Yeah.
I thought, what was the difference? And what I learned from that was that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
Right.
And something else better came along. Same thing. I look back on that situation with St. George. You know, I thought in that moment, I thought, wow, my whole world has been taken from me. But then what came out of it, because I didn't go down that road, was something better. And I think if we just kind of have that optimistic point of view, that, you know, the better things are going to come along. And, you know, we're only here temporarily anyway. I always say life is on lease. So just make the best of what you've got for the time that we're here. And, success doesn't have to equal millions of dollars. Success can just be not having any anxiety or stress, or just being surrounded by the people and things that you love. It's simple as that.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you my background to give you an idea of how similar it is. In 2009 or 10, right after the recession had hit, I worked for a commercial real estate developer. Well, one thing you don't develop in commercial real estate when you're going through a recession, because the banks aren't loaning and companies aren't spending money, and our business was off 98%, which meant it didn't exist. So I'm like, well, what am I got to do? I got to feed. My kids were in high school. I got to feed my family. And I'm like, so I applied to be a police officer, and went through the process. And we're going through it's months long of a process. And I was in my 40s, so that was a whole different issue, But physically, I was in shape, and I passed everything, and I got accepted, and I got accepted by LAPD, and all I had to go through was the actual physical, like a physical test, and then the psychological test, and then I wait for an opening at the academy. And I go and take the physical, and to find out I'm hard of hearing. And which if your hearing goes slowly, you don't realize it. Like, that's what I was told my daughters. Like, I never knew that bird was chirping, because I didn't, if you don't hear it, you don't hear it. Mm-hmm. You don't know it's there. So I go through the whole process, and I end up getting the job I have now, which is the best job I've ever had. I make more money than I ever thought I'd make. Have the lifestyle. I work from home, or I'm on the road, and people are super friendly that I work with. It's not cutthroat, but all because of my bad hearing, which I didn't even know I had. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's just like things happen the way they're supposed to happen. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's, like I said, it's, that's the lesson I learned too. When things don't go the way I thought I wanted them to go, something better always is around the corner. And another thing that I've always experienced is when things are at the worst, that's when the beacon of light comes. You turn a corner and everything can change. And within 24 hours, things can completely turn around. Just like I went on that walk and come back from that walk, and one email changed my life. One email.
That's just incredible, though.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. And what's really interesting is Katy Perry did a song, and of course, before I bring this up, I probably should remember what the song is. But one of the songs she did for the Olympics, and it was shot in that same canyon. And the visual is that she's dragging this parachute behind her, and it's weighing her down. It's literally like keeping her from progressing, and she's struggling to move through this canyon. And then at the very end, that same parachute is making her soar. And I thought, wow, what a great visual and a great story to tell.
Yeah. That
the things that we think hold us down, or we think are our weaknesses, are things that actually can become our strength and can save us. And I thought it was interesting that she would choose that same exact canyon in St. George.
Where you found your Snow Canyon, yeah.
Where I found my kind of magic. And it's interesting is I immediately after this happened, I had a really good friend. Her name's Lisa. And I called her up and I said, Lisa, you wouldn't believe what just happened. And we started going on walks up this canyon together. And we've been doing this now for 15 years.
Oh, that's cool.
Where we get together at least once a year and we manifest what we want. And everything that I've ever said out loud in that canyon has come true. And even for her too, like when I met her, she was recently divorced, struggling to keep food on the table for her kids. She was making jewelry, doing a lot of like side hustle.
Yeah.
And, to make ends meet. And, now she's remarried, and they own a hot yoga studio, which is one of the best studios in St. George. And they've just opened a coffee shop. And I just saw on Instagram yesterday, they opened one that looks like they opened one in the entrance to Zion National Park. So
that's cool.
I'm like, wow, what a huge chain reaction that's happened in her life since we started, focusing on the positive and manifesting and saying out loud the things we want. And then we show up and we go and collect. And that's what you have to do. You can dream all you want, but if you don't show up to collect, you're not going to get it. And it's been really fun to watch both of our lives have these great things happen to us because we decided that that's what we wanted. And then it just happened.
Have you shared some of this with, I would imagine a lot of your actors are, out of work. And have you shared some of these positive ideals, that things will work out with them?
Not as much as I should. I know the actors that I'm in contact with now are ones that we're actually using.
Yeah.
Because we are able to use some talent, depending on the games. Like if we do spy game, of course we need our talent. But I think I'm not a preachy person. Like I'm not going to tell you how you should live your life, and I'm not going to tell you your answers because what worked for me may not work for you.
Right.
But people that are in a crossroads in their life and they know my history of where I've been, those people seek me out and they ask me the questions. But I don't really volunteer my knowledge as much unless someone asks me, because you're not going to know unless you just do it yourself. And then my remedy may not work for you. My idea of going on a walk and saying affirmations may not work for you. You have to find out what works for you, and then you do it. You can talk to 100 different trainers at the gym, and they're all going to tell you what you need to do to be in shape. And the only person that really knows is yourself, because you know your own body.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I go to a gym and some guys want to get you bulky. Some guys want to get you more athletic, build. And some people are trying to get reps. Some trying to weight. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. My grandmother always told me, she says, Chad, anything that you want in life, you just have to do a little bit of it every single day. And then eventually you will get there. So, if you want to be healthy, then every day you make those better choices. If you want to be more successful and make more money or whatever it is that you want, just every day you just have to do something in that direction. And then eventually you'll get there. Some people, it will take them their whole life to figure this out. Some people figure it out really young. You look how many millionaires are like in their 20s. They're like, gosh, why wasn't I that guy? Well, because that wasn't my path.
Correct.
And I didn't need that kind of success for whatever reason at that age. Maybe it would have been detrimental to me. Maybe if I had that kind of money when I was 25, I would have turned out to be a horrible person. I just don't know.
It's interesting because I tell when you start looking back, like Johnny Manziel was the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, and I think he was the same age as my oldest daughter. So at like 21 or 22, they gave him $10-15 million. And, the key to the city and all that and press and fame. Well, what do you think? What would you have been like when you were 21 years old with $15 million?
A jerk.
Exactly. That would have been a nightmare,
Yeah.
And guess what? It was a nightmare. He went through it. Now he's getting older. But yeah, how do you, people critique all these kids for being multimillionaires. Like, I remember when I made like $50,000 in a year, or I was just like, I'm wealthy, back in the late 80s. And I was like, I thought I was I thought I had made it. So imagine if it was, $5 million. Like,
exactly.
I would have been a train wreck.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's one thing they always tell you. The professionals will tell you, don't ever compare yourself to others.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't. It's hard not to, especially nowadays, but you can't.
Mm-hmm. Especially with social media. You just have to turn that off. Honestly, speaking of social media, my anxiety was running a little high when all of this shutdown started happening. And of course, when all the conspiracy theories started spinning around, you're like, oh my gosh, we're coming to the end of the world. The aliens will be landing on our planet next.
Trying to find a location to buy toilet paper.
Right, exactly. how I lowered my stress is I deleted all the news apps and social media off my phone. And it's still like the only social media I have on my phone now is Instagram, because it's the only one that doesn't seem to get super hyper weird.
Yeah.
At least the people I follow. And if they do get weird, I just unfollow them. And and everything else I've taken off my phone. And like if I need to go on Facebook, I have to literally go onto my desktop or my laptop and type in facebook.com. And then, I get so lost in that thing anyway. It keeps changing. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not missing anything. when I scroll through there and I see everyone shouting at each other, I'm like, wow, I'm really not. My life is so much more enriched not having, just, I figure something's important enough. My mom or friend, someone's going to call me and say, hey, heads up. But other than that, no, it's really great to just not be clouded by that energy, because it affects you.
Chad, I literally this morning went through my Twitter, and you can block keywords. I don't know if you knew that. You can actually set up your Twitter feed to not. So I blocked Trump, Biden, Kamala, and Pence.
That sounds like a healthy dose of yes.
Because I'm like, there's nothing good coming out of any of that for the next 3 months.
Exactly.
So I don't want to, when I know Election Day is on the 3rd of November, right? So I'll show up on that day. I don't need to hear all the BS that's going to be coming down the pike the next 3 months from both sides.
Exactly. Yeah, I got my ballot in the mail.
Yeah,
and I'm actually a Florida resident. So I split my time between here and California and Florida.
There you go.
So I'm like, my vote will actually count this year. This is great. So I requested it by mail because I don't know if I'm going to be there on November 3rd. Yeah, so I have it ready to go. I'm like, oh, yeah, exactly. So much of that, especially now, it's become so toxic, and it's really...
It's terrible.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to be happy right now and they're struggling with anxiety or depression, just for step one, turn off the news. You will sleep so much better at night, and you won't have all this angst and anger. Because that's, whoever's orchestrating all this is what they want, and this is what we're getting, and just don't buy into it. Create your own reality, literally, by just turning it off.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be interesting because I went back on to check my Twitter feed, and all of it was gone. It worked.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. But of course, I haven't really been on those. But if I feel the need to get on Twitter, I'll definitely try out that feature, because that sounds.
Well, there are things I want to learn. I follow all the airlines, so I want to know what's going on with that as far as travel and hotel chains and that kind of thing. I want to know about deals that they're doing, and so I can share or whatever. So I want to go on and get that kind of information. I just don't want to go hear about all the other crap that comes up first. It's like, so that was cool. Somebody told me that, and you could block those words. I'm like, what?
That's great.
Privacy and settings. I was like, done. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause if you were to just never leave your house and look at the world through the lens of social media, you would think that the world was such a horrible, ugly place, and that we are in the middle of a war. But if you walk outside your home,
you find out it's not.
Go down to the local grocery store, go to Costco, go about your life.
Yeah.
It's like, no, everything is pretty fine, and people are actually pretty friendly, and people smile, and we set aside our differences when we're out in public. But when we are online, the ugly comes out of people.
Yeah.
Like they're true. Well, sadly, what it is they're true. But you don't have to be a part of the ugliness because everybody has a good side and everybody has a bad side. That's just reality. But we don't need to see the ugly of people. It's just not necessary.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be the goal for the next 3 months.
Exactly.
Between fighting COVID and the election. It's like, I'm just going to stay.
Well, hopefully your listeners will be like, yeah, that's a great idea.
I know.
Just help a few more people out there and share that with other people. Let people know that there's a way to detoxify your mind of all of this just, unnecessary drama.
Well, that's why I'm so happy to talk to you, because for one, you've already pivoted your company, and then it just sounds like you have a good positive mindset. And I think that's what a lot of people need, because if you're watching the news, you're not getting it. So they need things like this. Hopefully this podcast reaches a couple hundred or a couple thousand people, and they listen to it, and it changes their mind. Maybe, hopefully they don't all go to Snow Canyon, but, they'd look for their own canyon in their life to go and scream about things and not let it eat them up, and stay positive.
I'll tell you, now is the time, and now is the perfect time to be extremely, I don't want to almost like selfish. All right. Everybody has the permission to be selfish right now, in the way of, you should really take this time to focus on you and focus on what is not working for you. And if you don't know, if you don't have the answers to what you need, just ask yourself, like, get into a quiet place and say, why isn't this working? And guess what? Wisdom will just tell you, but you have to be open to receive that information. And that was the biggest thing for me in my life, was being open to deprogram myself, because I grew up with a certain kind of belief system that apparently was not working for me when I was in my early 20s. And it was really scary, because a lot of it had to do with my religious upbringing, the community that I grew up in. There was just a lot. And I had to just be very self-focused for a while. And it allowed me to just open my mind to things. And since then, I find myself to be less judgmental. I don't get fired up about a lot of things that I used to get fired up about. And I just have this more just relaxed way of life. And if something doesn't work out, for example, I can't say what, but I was in the finals to be on a national TV show just recently. And I made it right to the finals. And I thought, oh, wow, this could change my life. This is great. And then I didn't make it. And then we'll come back next year. It's just a timing thing. And most people that apply the first year don't make it anyway. But I could have been crushed by that. Or you just kind of go oh, well, that's not the right time for me.
That's what it is too.
Yeah. My old self would have been devastated, and I would have gotten out of bed for 3 months like I did before. But now, if you just kind of, be mindful and take care of your mental health and your spiritual health, and just kind of stay centered on yourself, then you can be a better person to other people. So
I've had a couple friends try and be finalists on different shows for entrepreneurs, and one made it on, and it didn't really. They didn't get what they thought they were going to get out of it. The other one didn't quite get on either. But you know what? They learned, and they learned what they got what they needed.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, being on that really, I learned some new things about my business, and I made me. It's kind of like if you're going to start a business, you should always do a business plan, buy one of those programs online, because even if you're never going to present it to anybody, what it will do is it will make you think about every little detail of your business and every possible revenue stream that could come. And that's kind of what this did for me, is it made me, because I had to fill out this ridiculous application. Yeah. And it made me think about every little tiny aspect of my business. So I got something out of it, and it was fun. And, it's not over. They said, come back next year. So maybe I will. If I feel like that's the right thing for me, I'll do it.
And maybe you won't. So.
Yeah, and maybe I won't. And, it's kind of like when I was another little personal story. I was a fat kid growing up. So I grew up with all of those insecurities and, being bullied. And, my older brother was like the opposite of me. He was an athlete, he was fit. All the girls liked him. I was the awkward, choir boy. I was just he's a sweet spirit, whatever. And as I age into my early 20s, I was kind of a late bloomer. All of a sudden, my whole physique changed, and I looked the mirror reflection changed, and I looked like a Disney prince. And I went and auditioned for Disney, thinking, why not? And I beat out. This was at college, and I beat out all the music, dance, theater students. They let them all go, and they kept me. And I was not a music, dance, theater student. I was a broadcast journalism student. And they offered me a job right on the spot. Like, wow. You could play a number of our princes, and I have a really big vocal range. Like, you could sing all of our male tracks. We want to offer you a contract. And I thought, wow, this is a dream come true, because I was the ugly fat kid, and now I'm a Disney prince.
Yeah.
It's like the ugly duckling, you know? And I said, yes, when? And they're like, you need to go to Florida next week. I'm like, well, I'm in the middle of my semester.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Well, rehearsals start next week, so do you want the job or not? And I had to turn it down. And that was one of those things where that was a dream come true for me. And they said, well, come back next year and, audition again.
Yeah.
Well, next year came around, guess what? I didn't audition because my life had gone in a totally different direction. And as much as I would have loved to have that experience to work for Disney and to be a performer at Disney, hindsight, everybody that I know that have worked for Disney was like, oh, Chad, you dodged the bullet,
That's what I was going to tell you.
Company to work for. But as a performer, they're like, it's kind of like that's not as glamorous as you think. And so, of course, I'm still a Disney fan. I have my, I'm a card holding member, to the parks. But I didn't have that experience. But I look at what came out of my life because of that. I decided to be an entrepreneur instead. And had I worked for Disney, maybe I would still be there, still singing and dancing.
No, they would have gotten rid of you by now.
Or I would have been the director. But regardless, I wouldn't be working for myself. But I don't know. Because the job that I took, so I took a different performing job, local. I was in Utah. I took just a local theme park there for the summer. I took that job instead, and I did that for 2 summers. And the connections that I made from that got me working for Larry Miller, who owned the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
And I became one of his directors of entertainment very quickly. So here I was, 25 years old, had this nice job title, made a nice salary, built and bought my own house at 25. And after that, I worked there for maybe, 3 years. I'm like, I reached my limit here.
Yep.
And I wanted more. So I quit my job with a tax return that I got. And just didn't know what I was going to do exactly, but it worked out. The tools came to me when I needed them.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time. I know you. I don't want to overstep my boundaries with. I know you got some other things going on. What? Geez, that was just a great conversation. I want to say thank you.
Oh well, thanks for having me on them. I don't get a platform very often to talk about these things. I am actually writing a book right now, but it's not necessarily gonna talk about all the things I talked about today. Like, hoping that the book will open up more platforms like this where I could talk about those things.
Sure. When do you expect that book to be wrapped up?
So it's taking a lot longer than we expected.
They always do.
Yeah, and I have a writer that's helping me, with all the research, because it's a very research-heavy book. And the goal is to have it finished by the end of this year so that we can do a launch next year. And the title of the book is called The Law of Zero, and it's about zeroing out your trauma. Because what keeps you from achieving everything that you want in life is the trauma that you've experienced in your life. It's just be something you don't even remember when you're 3 years old and Johnny came and took your toy away from you. That could completely traumatize you and you don't realize it. So it's just like getting to that Zen place and no longer being a victim. Because in my life, I had every reason to be a victim. I had the cards stacked up against me. And I decided when I was about 25, in the midst of all this good stuff that's happening, my personal life was falling apart. And I realized I wanted a whole new deck of cards. And so I did. I said, bye to the old, in with the new, and the rest is history.
Well, it's interesting because, my dad told me when I was like under 10, because I remember we lived in Arizona at the time.